Anybody that's been on my Instagram and has looked back at some of the old pictures can see that back a couple years ago, we did a mod on an original Xbox, and we put what was it, Ryzen 5 2600 and a 1060 inside of an original Xbox case, and we spent probably something to the effect of like 100 hours just fabricating and building in to get that ready to go. So originally, I, I had the idea to do this back in like 2017, 2016, um, which I would have, I wish I would have gotten some of the parts back then. But basically, what's going to happen here is over the next several weeks, I'm just going to kind of blog, vlog, whatever style, do the mod on this Compaq Portable Plus. This computer came out in 1983, though the more I look at some of the pieces inside, it looks like this may have actually been spec ordered in 84. So, not entirely sure. It's definitely been opened a couple times. There's markings on the back in the pry spots where you can tell that this has been opened. This is a non-working unit, and this unit is most of the reason that it's now the end of 2020 and I'm just building it is because I didn't want to get a working unit and tear it apart and build a computer inside of a working unit. I very strongly believe that um, you know, units like this are, important pieces of history and that they should be enjoyed in their original form. That being said, when this one is plugged in, it smokes. So it's done. The tubes for the screen are not any good. The keyboard, though, does feel like it should still be good. So what I'm going to do is, today basically we're just going to tear it apart, and then we're kind of going to talk about some of the pieces and parts that I'm going to need to complete this mod, some of the pieces and parts that I already have, and this is just kind of like the initial planning day. Like, I haven't been inside of one of this specific unit ever in my life, so I'm going to be kind of learning as you guys learn too, and one of the most important things you're going to have to figure out is like airflow. Airflow is going to be crucially important to making this into a functioning unit. And yeah, but we're going to take out any cards or boards or anything that we can get our hands on, and we're going to try to visually inspect them and see if we can see any kind of physical problems on the cards. And anything that we identify as having a physical problem, we're going to put off to the side. Those are going to go to the electronics recycler to try to reclaim some of those rare earth materials and just recycle back into, the electronics manufacturing world. Any parts that look like they're still okay, I'm going to set off to the side. And maybe, if we get lucky, and if enough folks tune in to these vlog episodes, we can find some people that have, working units and are, either looking for backup parts or something like that, and we can just give them to them. And they can keep on maintaining the history of these awesome machines, because these are really, really cool. I remember being very, very young, like in elementary school, and our school had one of these, and they were so cool. It's got the 9-inch tube display here. This one is equipped with a hard drive and a 5.5-inch floppy. The hard drive is the part that I want to say was more of a 1984 thing. I could be wrong on that. I don't know the complete history of the Portable Plus line, as when I was in school and we had the 5.5-inch portable style computers, we didn't have the Compaqs. So I'm not super familiar with the actual Compaqs. But all in all, what we've got here is essentially about the room of a mid-tower PC. Obviously, we don't have any of the new conveniences like a basement, for our power supply and stuff like that. So it's going to be kind of tricky getting everything in here as we want it and maintaining the case integrity while still getting sufficient cooling. One of the nice parts about this, though, is that the approximate size of the hard drive vent where the hard drive is currently located and the 5.5-inch floppy is about 200 millimeters. So I know I can get in the front something like a 200 millimeter fan to pull air in, and then we'll just make like a custom grill for it so you don't see the fan there. I guess the big question outside of that is, how much of a sleeper do you want it to be? Do we want to have, like a little bit of lighting visible, like, hey, something's weird with that, so, how are we going to do that? Another challenge is going to be the keyboard. I haven't decided yet because the keyboards for the Compaq portables are kind of notoriously not great. The switches are a foil and foam switch, so there's no actual mechanical actuation to the switch, even though it kind of feels and sounds like it a little bit. I mean, kind of sounds like a dingy old mechanical key. They are a foam and foil, so we aren't going to be we're going to be really limited in how we do this. Not only that, but obviously it's a non-modern layout. I mean, it is still QWERTY. You have F1 through F10, but like there's no Windows key or anything like that. So what I think I'm going to wind up doing is actually just taking the case for this and building my own keyboard right over top of it with a custom PCB, and going with like a USB-C interface and seeing if I can get some kind of a pigtail type cable for the USB-C, mounting the controller back here, and we'll use some bracing underneath. But we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves on that. First, what we're going to do, let's go ahead, and I've already popped the holding pins on the back out so we can get the cover off, and we're going to start disassembling on the inside, and then we'll move over. I've got my notebook here and a pen, and I've got one of the parts that was super crucial to even getting this whole thing started. I've already got it here, so it's very cool. So let's go ahead. I'm probably gonna speed this up in post, and we'll go ahead and we'll take this panel off, check out the inside, see if there's anything we can save, and I'll cut back in with some audio if I find something weird, and we'll talk about it. So apparently they really didn't want this hard drive to come out of the cage here, because 3 of the Torx screws that hold to the actually super impressive shock mounts, there's like these rubber nipples in here, and this whole hard drive just kind of floats inside. But one of the screws has been filled with glue. It's like a red glue. It looks like it's from the factory. It's really quite wild. I don't remember how... I don't remember how big this hard drive is. I'd have to look it up. I wish we could have... You know, on one hand, I wish that this could have been booted. That way I could have a look, you know, and play with it. But on the other hand, I wouldn't be tearing it apart if it was a booting computer. So I guess we'll keep this, because this is unknown if this is good or bad. So we'll keep this off to the side, and you know, maybe if someone else approaches me with a working Compaq portable, you know, we can get them this hard drive and see what size it is, and see what maybe see what's on it. That would be cool. If there's some, you know, was this computer used for games, or, you know, typing exercises, or was it used, you know, for accounting, or, you know, fully business? You know, it's hard to say. You know, if I had to guess, I'd probably say it was a business computer, probably some accounting stuff. But, you know, you can hope. You know, you can always hope that there's something cool on there, an old game or something. Text-based dungeon crawler, that would be so cool. So here's a good spot to talk about safety. This portion of the teardown is where things get really, really, really sketchy. So essentially, this is just an old tube TV, and even though it's not plugged in or anything like that, it still is all exposed capacitors. The entire coil for the tube TV is completely exposed, because this is essentially, we just took the TV's housing off, and now this is cool. All the adjustment dials are all internal. You can really tune this display in. That's really neat. That's really cool. But I'm getting sidetracked. So one, I don't know how long before I got this that someone plugged it in. And essentially, as soon as you plug it in and put power to it, there's power in the capacitors and stuff like that. Unless something was shorted and it wasn't getting power to any of the capacitors or anything like that. But we're going to assume, for safety's sake, that power made it to all of the capacitors for the power supply and for the tube display. So that means that there is potential energy stored in all of these coils and capacitors, and if I don't be very, very, very careful, there's actually enough energy in there, potentially, that it could kill me. So, don't, unless you know what you're doing with tube televisions, never mess around with the internals. Because there's potential for several hundred volts and enough amps, which is the important part, to kill you. So just dispose of them properly. So this one, because of the nature of removing the tube, I'm going to need some different equipment than I currently have here at my house for safety's sake. So I will not be filming the removal of this tube out of this case, just because it's not safe, and I don't want people to just be mucking around trying to do anything with the tube display just because you saw, some idiot on YouTube messing around with the tube display. Don't do it. If you don't know how to do it and you want to know how to do it, I'd have to say that, there's the people that are still, tuning tubes, especially for like the retro cabinets and the old school arcades. There are still people out there that are tuning tubes and rebuilding tubes. Get in touch with them. Those are people that do it for the love of the game. So I don't see why anybody that does that wouldn't be more than happy to show you how they do things and do it the right way. But I'm not that experienced. I can remove one of these tubes, but I don't know how to tune them or anything. But I'm just going to be removing this tube because this tube, I did plug this in. So I know that there was electricity going into this since I've had it. How far it got into it, I don't know. But even though it's been unplugged now for a couple of months, I still don't trust that there could be, one of these capacitors or the tube or the coil could still have, potentially stored energy in there. So basically, I'm going to ground up, wear all the protective gear. I'm going to very easily or very carefully and methodically remove the tube components and the power supply components. Keep them separate from anything else. Those are going to go straight to a recycler because I cannot confirm whether or not they are working. All I know is that from somewhere on this side we got smoke, so we could potentially find a blown capacitor or something like that. I've found on a couple of the chips so far that there is what looks to be some kind of oily substance, almost like this may have taken some liquid damage at some point. So that could explain our little black line of smoke. Not really sure. I haven't seen any kind of tracing that's fried. One thing earlier I pointed out when I pulled the essentially it's the video card. On the back of that, you can see where trace was jumped with a wire. Now that's not all, that's not uncommon on older boards. Sometimes you just had to jump a trace with a wire. If something wasn't performing how you wanted or you wanted to do something different. It's totally common practice, but it's cool to see that, that was some old school knowledge, somebody that was knowledgeable enough to know which trace to jump to which. Reminds me of when I was a kid putting my first mod chip into an old PlayStation 1, soldering the mod chip mid-trace on the PlayStation 1 board and just thinking the whole time, there's no way this is going to work. But with some patience and practice, I did get pretty good, and I did several mod chips on the original PlayStation back in the late 90s. Several different units that people brought to me, and I still actually have the first one that I successfully did to this day, and it still works. So, very cool. All right, so let's cut here. Let's go to talking time. All right, so since we have to do something with the power supply and the tube unit, that's pretty much going to be as far as we're going to be able to get it apart today. So we need to get a list going now to see what we're going to need for parts. So let's go ahead and start that. So one of the rough parts about this project is my budget has been slashed a bunch of times, but we still have some pretty good stuff to put inside. Currently I have in stock, let's see what I got. I got a Ryzen 7 1700X, which should be just fine for some gaming and stuff like that. I have a Vega 56 blower card and a GTX 1080. So we might go with, depending on how we can set our thermals up. A lot of people are like, well, obviously use the 1080 because it's more powerful than the Vega 56. Yes, but that brings me to the next part here, and I'm going to show you guys this. This is our screen and a 12 volt to barrel connector adapter. So this is going to be cool. So to replace the tube screen in the front, I managed to find a 4:3 aspect ratio, 1024 by 768. Yeah, 1024 by 768. 60 hertz. So I mean, yeah, it would be cool if it was, you know, some crazy like 120 hertz or something LCD panel, but 60 is fine. And at 1024 by 768, that Vega is gonna drive everything we need it to. So this is the new panel that's going to be replacing the tube display that's already inside. So very cool. It's pretty cheap. I only paid like 30 bucks for this. So that's going to be pretty awesome. And the whole thing will be able to be powered by the power supply, you know, the PSU that's already in the computer. So very cool. This is the controller board for that. It's got HDMI output, VGA, and yellow RCA, and then 12 volt barrel. So we're gonna have a little bit of figuring out to do, because it does have like a settings, a little daughter board here for getting into the display menu. But one of the cool things is it has an infrared sensor and a remote. So as long as we can get this this IR sensor someplace that is, you know, visible by the remote, then we shouldn't have to worry about having access to all the buttons. So that'll be pretty cool. Yeah, this is a neat little pickup here. So this is going to be really sick once we get that installed. But yeah, so we're going to need, for sure, I don't have any power supplies in stock, so we're going to need a PSU. We're going to need to do some testing on the airflow once we get that sorted out. So what I'm thinking is we're going to do one 200 millimeter in the front, drawing air in. That way it's not pushing warm air out on your fingers when you're on the keyboard. So the front will be the intake. So we'll intake air from the front. So we're going to do 200 millimeter there. And then we have enough room on the sides we can have 1x 120 millimeter on either side. So essentially in the back, so we have the screen here, the 200 millimeter here, and on either side there's spots we can have one. Actually, it's probably, we'll have to get some fans and check that out, because it might actually be 90 millimeter. So it would be nice if it was large enough to handle 120 millimeter, because then we would be closer to the overall square millimeter coverage size for the sides and the front. It's 290s less than 120. We'd have depending on the static pressure of the fan, that would mean that we would have a positive airflow, a positive pressure inside of the case. Because that is another thing that we want to focus on, is trying to make sure that everything is not necessarily sealed up, but we want our air path to be, we want the path that the air takes through the case to be set. We don't want a bunch of stuff where it can leak out here, leak out there. We want that path to go in a certain direction. So we want it to come in the front and then go right out each side at the back. That way we can remove as much heat from these newer components, because newer components are going to generate a lot more heat than the old components. So we definitely are going to need fans. We know we're going to need a 200 millimeter, and I'm going to say that we're going to try to, even if the mounting is a little wonky, we're still going to try to put 120 millimeter side exhaust fans on it. The question is going to be, and I'll pose this to you guys, so let me know in the comments of what you think. Should we do lighted fans, or should we do some, so we could do like a 3-pack, or get a pack of like the Corsair IQ, get a couple of those 120s, and then do a Corsair IQ controlled 200 millimeter in the front. I think they make those. We'll have to do some research on that, but we could go that route, or those would be pretty adequate. I mean, I wouldn't call those the greatest static pressure fans, but at least you know that they're good quality fans. Go the full-blown performance route and get some Noctuas. We'll get some Noctua fans and put in there. They'd even match the current color scheme of the computer, which is great, because it's so few and far between in the situations that the Noctua color scheme actually lines up with anything. But Noctua color scheme would actually line up on this. So I'm going to pose that question to you guys. Do you think that we should put lights in this or not? Should we make this a fully sleeper build? Like totally no one would have any idea, no lights or anything, or should we make it like you push a button and like it comes to life, and like lights pour out of it and stuff? Let me know in the comments. It's going to be really interesting to see what the majority opinion on that's going to be, and whatever that ends up being, that's what I'll do first. Now, when it comes down to it at the end, if we can't get enough cooling performance, I will switch it out and put the Noctuas in. If everybody wants to go with the RGB fans and those don't provide good enough cooling, good enough air movement, and we'll just go with the Noctuas. And at that point, it's, it has to be functional. So we have to do that. So we need a PSU, we need a power supply. I think to be on the safe side, we're going to go ahead and say right now that we are going to go with an SFX. So we're going to do an SFX power supply. That's going to be, we may not need it. I'm going to have to do some more calculations on the internal space once I get the rest of the brass pieces removed. But to be safe, we're gonna say SFX up front. and whether or not we go with the 1080 or the 56, I think we're gonna probably minimum 650 watt. Another thing, so we're gonna need this. So we need a power supply, SFX power supply 650 modular. We need that too. We need the 200 millimeter fan, and we need the 120s. We have a Tomahawk motherboard, so that should be just fine. We'll use that Tomahawk motherboard. We have the GPU, so we're good on that. We're good on those. We have 16 gigs of 3200 RAM. Dumb. We have that. We have 3200 megahertz. It's not RGB, but it doesn't matter with this because you'll never be able to see it. CPU cooler. So this is going to be another one here. We have the vertical room for an aftermarket cooler, which is super awesome. So we can put an aftermarket cooler in this. I need to get out the tape measure to see exactly how much, but it looks to be slightly more than a standard MATX, style case. So we should be good on that. So basically, I'm thinking about putting something like a Hyper 212 or a Hyper 212 clone, maybe the Noctua version of a 212 clone. That would be sufficient cooling, and it should move the heat away from that CPU and get it, into the air path that we were talking about, going from the front to the sides. That Hyper 212 clone, or the Noctua tower cooler. So let's call it a tower cooler. We'll go with the tower cooler. So we need that tower CPU cooler. That's a need. All right. Next up is we're going to need an SSD. So that motherboard has at least one M.2 slot on it. So let's get a 500 gigabyte SSD. Preferably an M.2 NVMe, so it's nice and fast. That should be enough room to store a few games on here. The operating system and a launcher. So that should be plenty. So we got RAM, we got a CPU, we got a motherboard, we have two graphics cards to choose from. We need a power supply. We need 3 fans total, 220 millimeter and one 200 millimeter. We need to get a tower cooler, so like a 212 or a 212 clone, something like that. For the CPU, we need to get the SSD. So let's see here. Let's try. Hopefully, I think I might be able to do all of this for 300 bones or less. I think I can get everything that I need for 300 bones. So let's make that our challenge to keep it under that. Let me know, like I said in the comments, what I should go with. The RGB, try that, or go with the just go with the straight Noctua cooling solutions. But anywho, we're gonna call that a wrap for today, since we've got parts that need to be ordered and we can't go any further on our teardown. So I'm gonna go ahead and get upstairs and out of this cold basement, edit this video together. So if you guys like this, if you're interested in this stuff or whatever, give me a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, let me know in the comments about the cooling fans, and I'll be interested over the next couple weeks here to hear what everyone says, so I can get the orders in and get some of these parts on their way, and we can get to, we also need, before I forget, we need to find the what is that thing called? I can't even remember right now. the squeezy thing for fastening plates together, the fastener gun, whatever that thing is called. I gotta find mine. I got one around here somewhere, but I'm gonna need to get some more of the ends, the fasteners. So gotta do that. All right, everybody, have a great week. It's starting to get cold outside, so make sure you stay warm. Make sure to be cool to everybody that you come across. Have a great Thanksgiving, and if you're seeing this at the other holidays, have a great holiday season. And I'll talk to you later. Bye.